I had these obsessive desires and thoughts wanting to control them, to, I don't know how to put it, possess them permanently.
And that's why you killed them?
Right, right. Not because I was angry with them, not because I hated them, but because I wanted to keep them with me. And as my obsession grew, I was saving body parts such as skulls and skeletons.
You killed these men. Afterwards, were you repulsed? Were you upset?
No, at the time, it was almost addictive. It was almost a surge of energy. I wouldn't have to worry about any of their needs or anything. I just had complete control of the situation.
Why did you photograph them?
It was my way of remembering their appearance, their physical beauty. I also wanted to keep if I couldn't keep them there with me whole, at least I felt that I could keep their skeletons. And I even went so far as planning on setting up an altar with the 10 different skulls and skeletons.
And what was the purpose of the altar going to be?
As a sort of memorial. A point where I could, I don't know. It's so bizarre and strange, it's hard to describe. A place where I could collect my thoughts and feed my obsession.
When the bodies were still in your apartment, there was no time when you would see them and say, this is grotesque, what have I done?
There were times, but the compulsive obsession with doing what I was doing overpowered any feelings of revulsion.
Dahmer was born on May the 21st, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to Lionel and Joyce Dahmer. But from all accounts, Dahmer was a happy child who enjoyed typical toddler activities, although it was not until the age of 6, after he underwent a hernia surgery, that his personality began to change from a joyful social child to a loner who was uncommunicative and withdrawn. His facial expressions transformed from sweet to childish smiles to a motionless blank stare, which was the look which remained with him throughout his life. In 1966, the Dahmers moved to Bath, Ohio. Dahmer's insecurities grew after the move, and his shyness kept him away from making any friends. While his peers were busy listening to the latest songs, Dahmer was busy collecting roadkill and stripping the animal carcasses and saving the bones. His other lazy time was spent alone, buried deep inside his fantasies. His non-confrontational attitude with his parents was considered an attribute, but in reality, it was his indifference towards the real world that made him appear obedient. Dahmer continued to be a loner during his years at Revere High School. He had average grades and worked on the school newspaper and developed a dangerous drinking problem. His parents struggling with an issue of their own. Divorced when Jeff was almost 18, he remained living with his father, who travelled often and was busy having another relationship with his new wife. Dahmer enrolled to the Ohio State University and spent most of his time skipping classes to get drunk. After 2 semesters, he dropped out and returned home. His father issued him with an ultimatum, which was either get a job or join the army. In 1979, he enlisted for 6 years into the army, but his drinking continued, and in 1981, after serving only 2 years, he was discharged because of his drunken behaviour. Unknown to anyone, Jeffrey Dahmer was mentally falling to pieces. In June of 1988, he was struggling with his own homosexual desires, mixed with his needs to act out his sadistic fantasies. Perhaps this struggle is what pushed him to pick up a hitchhiker, 19-year-old Stephen Hicks. He invited Hicks to his father's home, and the two drank and engaged in sex. But when Hicks was ready to leave, Dahmer bashed him in the head with a barbell and killed him. He then cut up the body, placing the parts in black bags, which he buried in the woods surrounding his father's property. Years later, he returned and dug up the bags and crushed the bones and scattered the remains around the woods. As insane as he had become, he had not lost sight of the need to cover his murderous tracks, but later, his explanation for killing Hicks was simply he didn't want him to leave. Dahmer spent the next 6 years living with his grandmother in West Allis, Wisconsin. He continued drinking heavily and often got in trouble with the police. In August 1982, he was arrested after exposing himself at a state fair. In September 1986, he was arrested and charged with public exposure after masturbating in public. He served 10 months in jail, but was arrested soon after his release after sexually fondling a 13-year-old boy in Milwaukee. He was given 5 years probation after convincing the judge that he needed therapy, but his father, unable to understand what was happening to his son, continued to stand by him, making certain that he had a good legal counsel. He also began to accept that there was little he could do to help the demons which seemed to rule Dahmer's behavior. He realized that his son was missing a basic human element, which was a conscience. In September 1987, while on probation on the molestation charges, Dahmer met 26-year-old Stephen Taumey, and the two spent the night drinking heavily and cruising gay bars, then went to a hotel room. When Dahmer awoke from his drunken daze, he found Taumey dead. Dahmer put Taumey's body into a suitcase, which he took to his grandmother's basement. It was there where he discarded the body into the bin after dismembering it, but not before gratifying his sexual necrophilia desires. Unlike most serial killers, who kill, then move on to find another victim, Dahmer's fantasies included a series of crimes against the corpse of his victims, or what he referred as to passive sex. This became a part of his regular pattern, and possibly the one obsession that pushed him to kill. Killing his victims in his grandmother's basement was becoming increasingly difficult to hide. He was working as a mixer at the Ambrosia Chocolate Factory and could afford a small apartment, so in September 1988, he got a one-bedroom apartment on North 24th Street in Milwaukee. Dahmer's killing spree continued, and for most of his victims, the scene was the same. He would meet them at a gay bar or a shopping centre and entice them with free alcohol and money if they agreed to pose for photographs. But once alone, he would drug them, sometimes torture them, then kill them, usually by strangulation. He would then masturbate over the corpse or have sex with the corpse, then cut up the body and get rid of the remains. He also kept parts of the bodies, including the skulls, which he would clean much like he did with his childhood roadkill collection, and often refrigerated organs, which he would on occasion eat. Dahmer's murdering activity continued uninterrupted until an incident on May 27, 1991. His 13th victim was 14-year-old Conorak Synthasamphone, who was also the younger brother of the boy Dahmer was convicted of molesting in 1989. Early in the morning, the young Conorak was seen wandering the streets nude and disorientated. When police arrived on the scene, they were paramedics, two women who were standing close to the confused Conorak and Jeffrey Dahmer. Dahmer told the police that Conorak was his 19-year-old lover who was drunk and the two had a fight. The police escorted Dahmer and the boy back to Dahmer's apartment, much against the protest of the women who had witnessed Conorak fighting off Dahmer before the police had arrived. The police found Dahmer's apartment neat, and other than noticing an unpleasant smell, nothing that seemed amiss. They left Conorak under Dahmer's care, but later, the police officers John Balsazak and Joseph Gabrish joked with the dispatcher about reuniting the lovers. But within hours, Dahmer killed Conorak and performed his usual ritual on the body. In June and July 1991, Dahmer's killing had escalated to one a week, until July the 22nd, when Dahmer was unable to hold his captive, his 18th victim, Tracy Edwards. According to Edwards, Dahmer tried to handcuff him, and the two struggled. Edwards escaped and was spotted around midnight by police, with the handcuffs dangling from his wrist. Assuming he had somehow escaped from authorities, the police stopped him. Edwards immediately told them about his encounter with Dahmer and led them to his apartment. Dahmer opened his door to the officers and answered their questions calmly. He agreed to turn over the key to unlock Tracy's handcuffs and moved to the bedroom to get it. One of the officers went with him, and as the officer glanced around the room, he noticed photographs of what appeared to be parts of bodies and a refrigerator full of human skulls. They decided to place Dahmer under arrest and attempted to handcuff him, but his calm attitude changed and began to fight and struggle unsuccessfully to get away. But with Dahmer under control, the police then began their initial search of the apartment and quickly discovered skulls and other various body parts, along with an extensive photo collection that Dahmer had taken documenting his crimes. The details of what were found in Dahmer's apartment were horrific, matching only to his confessions as to what he did to his victims. The items found in Dahmer's apartment included a human head and 3 bags of organs, which included 2 hearts, which were also found in the fridge. 3 heads, a torso, and various internal organs were inside a freezer. Chemicals such as formaldehyde, ether, and chloroform, plus 2 skulls, 2 hands, and male genitalia were found in the closet. A filing cabinet which contained 3 painted skulls, a skeleton, a dried scalp, male genitalia, and various photographs of his victims. A box with 2 skulls inside, a 57-gallon drum filled with acid, and 3 torsos with the victims' identifications. He also had bleach, which was to bleach the skulls and bones. Incense sticks were also found due to his neighbors often complained to Dahmer about the smell coming from his apartment. The tools found was a claw hammer, handsaw, a drill, and various sized drill bits, a hypodermic needle, various videos, some pornographic, blood-soaked mattresses, and blood splatters, and a King James Bible. Jeffrey Dahmer was indicted on 17 murder charges, which were later reduced to 15. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Much of the testimony was based on Dahmer's 160-page confession and from various witnesses who testified that Dahmer's necrophilia urges were so strong that he was not in control of his actions. The defense sought to prove that he was in control and capable of planning, manipulating, then covering up his crimes. The jury deliberated for 5 hours and returned a verdict of guilty on 15 counts of murder. Dahmer was sentenced to 15 life terms, a total of 937 years in prison. At his sentencing, Dahmer calmly read his 4-page statement to the court. He apologized for his crimes, and it ended with, "I hated no one. I knew I was sick, or evil, or both. Now I believe I was sick. The doctors have told me about my sickness, and now I have some peace. I know how much harm I have caused. Thank God there will be no more harm that I can do. I believe that only the Lord Jesus Christ can save me from my sins. I ask for no more consideration." Dahmer was sent to the Columbia Correctional Institute in Portage, Wisconsin. At first, he was separated from the general prison population for his own safety, but by all reports, he was considered a model prisoner who had adjusted well to prison life and was a self-proclaimed born-again Christian. But gradually, he was permitted to have some contact with other inmates. On November the 28th, 1994, Dahmer and inmate Jesse Anderson were beaten to death by fellow inmate Christopher Scarver while on work detail in a prison gym. Anderson was in prison for killing his wife, and Scarver was a schizophrenic, convicted of first-degree murder. The guards, for unknown reasons, left the 3 alone to return 20 minutes later to find Anderson dead and Dahmer dying from severe head trauma. Dahmer died in the ambulance before reaching the hospital. In Dahmer's will, he had requested upon his death that his body was to be cremated as soon as possible, but some medical researchers wanted his brain to be preserved so it could be studied. Lionel Dahmer wanted to respect his son's wishes and cremate all of his remains of his son. His mother felt his brain should go to research. The 2 parents went to court and the judge sided with Lionel, and after over a year, Dahmer's body was released from being held as evidence and the remains were cremated as he had requested.